Good afternoon from Southeast Asia. Oh, I was going to say this will be episode number. No, it's not an episode number, it's just an episode. We're going to talk about something that not a lot of guys have thought about, probably because there's no reason to think about it. What are you going to do, all of us guys living here in the Philippines, what are you going to do? Is there going to be a war with China? Trying to think this through. Is there going to be a war with China? Well, no. Not going to be a flat out nuclear boom boom holocaust. Even stupid China is not stupid enough to cause that over some crappy coral reefs in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they want it very badly. Obviously, they want those shoals up there in the here's the quotes, the South China Sea, which is not really the South China Sea, but anyway, they want that crappy little pieces of shit up there. I don't know. They think it's strategic. Well, a little bit, but it's not worth risking a war. And I think even the stupid Chinese are not stupid enough to go flat out to war over some sandbars. Now, maybe they are. I lived with them, among them, with them, doing business with them for 10 years, 10 full, long, miserable, interminable years. They are crazy, yes. We all know that they're crazy. They're pushy and they're arrogant and they're assholes. No one likes them. I've circumnavigated the globe 2.5 times and lived in cities and countries all along the way for extended periods of time. I have not found any place, not even Hong Kong, that likes the Chinese. Before Hong Kong became China, the Hong Kongers very deeply lamented the fact that mainland Chinese were allowed to come to Hong Kong. Oh God, they hated it and they hated them. And they were rude to them and they didn't care. Well, okay then. We all know the Chinese are crazy. They're pushy. They will generally push to the point. You ever watch Star Trek? Here, I don't need to explain the Chinese. All I got to do is use one word, one noun. Watch Star Trek, the old episodes. I stopped watching it years ago because it got too silly and woke, and as most things got ruined. Anyway, they had Klingons and they had Vulcans and they had humans and they had I don't know what else, but they had. Here's the word. Here's the quotes. Remember this word. And if you don't know what I'm talking about and you never watched Star Trek, go watch 2 or 3 or 4 episodes where this race is in those episodes, and instantly you will understand the Chinese, and you will understand the Chinese forevermore. You'll never have to think about them again, about what they are and what they're capable of. Ferengi. Ferenga. Yeah, Ferengi. That's the Chinese. They want you to think. They got balls. Well, they do, right up until the point where they got to back them up. And then they don't. Except when they're crazy. A lot of times they can back themselves into a corner where they had no intention of backing anything up with balls. But they suddenly realized, oh my God, I'm in this corner and I'm going to get my ass kicked. Okay, nuke him. Okay, that's when they do things that are crazy, when they panic and they have a knee-jerk reaction. Left to their own devices, if they think things through, they don't. They will back down before they come to nuclear fisticuffs. That's my experience with the Chinese. They're all mouth. Not all mouth, they're 80% mouth. The Russians are not. The Russians are 20% mouth. Okay. So I think we can be pretty sure that the Chinese aren't going to do what they do to the Philippines, what they want to do to Taiwan. They're not just going to surround the Philippines and blow a whistle and invade. That's not going to happen. They're not going to nuke the Philippines. That's not going to happen. They don't want to be wiped off the earth any more than anybody else. And there's about 60 countries who would nuke those sons of bitches so fast they wouldn't even know what hit them if they did that. But the Chinese do have the balls to push and push and push until there is a limited skirmish over the Philippines or in the Philippines, over the stupid Scarborough Shoal and the Spratly Islands and all the stupid sandbars up there in the middle of nowhere. The Chinese are willing to lose blood over it. Anything like that is going to be short-lived. The United States and Japan and probably Vietnam. God, who knows? I mean, Ukraine. Who knows? Everybody hates the Chinese. Everybody wants a crack at kicking their ass, and I don't blame them. I do too. So anything like that, anything that where the Chinese get in over their head, it's going to be short-lived. A month probably tops. But here's the but. What if something like that happened and the Chinese ended up with actual boots on the ground in the northern Philippines for a month to, here's a quote, protect their interests. It's not their interests. It's not their freaking goddamn sea up there anyway. It belongs to a whole bunch of different countries, and the Chinese are just being Ferengi-like, trying to claim it. Bullshit. It's one of the biggest bullshit things I've ever seen in my entire life. But anyway, that's the scenario. Let's say that things do get out of hand. The Chinese get ballsier than they ought to. Well, they're already ballsier than they ought to be. They live their lives being ballsier than they ought to be. They just can't back it up. And most people know that. If you went to public school with Chinese, you watched how the little squabbles and fist fights played out on the playground, you know the Chinese did not back up shit. They'll start stuff and they'll mouth off and then they run. That's what they do. But the point of all of this preamble is, if it turns into a situation where the Chinese are on the ground in northern Philippines doing bad, heinous stuff to Filipinos and to Filipino interests, and you're an expat, probably you're an American because Americans have more of a big brother, little brother relationship with Philippines than any other country, I think. What are you going to do? You're living there in Angeles, Pampanga, you're living in Manila, you're living wherever, and it gets on the news and things are heating up and you're watching it, and all of a sudden you got 4,000 or 5,000 Chinese troops on the ground, northern Philippines. And they're doing this and they're doing that, raping, pillaging, whatever the hell the Ferengis do. And it's going to be a while before America gets there. I mean, America's big and heavy and slow, and logistically, they're like a one-legged hippo. They're slow. Not always, but very often. And so if the Chinese do something unexpected and the Americans aren't ready for it, I mean, ultimately, the Americans are going to save Philippines' ass. They're going to, period. That's all there is to it. They're going to. For the Filipinos watching this, don't even doubt it. Don't even begin to doubt it. America has no love whatsoever for China. None. Zero. Goes for most other countries, but the Americans especially, and me personally especially. So in the end, the Philippines is not at risk as a whole, but certain little parts of it could be at risk. So all of a sudden you got 4, 5, 6,000 Chinese troops on the ground, northern Philippines, and they're being Ferengis, and they're raping and pillaging, and they're doing this and they're doing that. They're sinking boats, and people are disappearing, and there's little squabbles, and there's little gun spats, and there's things like this, and they're blowing shit up, and they're being mouthy, and they're threatening everything and everybody. They're just being Ferengis. Okay. What are you, as an American expat, going to do? Now, if you're ex-military, I know what you're going to do. You're going to try your very best to volunteer. Lots and lots of guys with no military experience probably are going to try to volunteer also. Logistically, there's not a hell of a lot you can do. Everybody in the trenches is going to be speaking Tagalog. You probably can't speak Tagalog. You can't even communicate any counterattacks or anything like that. You're not familiar with their systems and their procedures. It's a nice sentiment to say, yeah, Chinese attacks Philippines. I'm right there. I'm on board. Where do I sign? Okay, it's a nice sentiment. I like it. I agree with it. Give me the document. I'll sign it too. But realistically, there's not a hell of a lot you can do. The only thing you could do would be to go rogue. Spy versus spy. French counter-resistance, underground resistance. That's all you can do. The problem is, even in that capacity, you get on the ground, you get in an area where there's conflict, you're looking around, you spend a week or two assessing. You say, okay, they got Chinese there and they're doing this and this. You got Filipinos over here and they're doing this and this. American troops are still 2.5 weeks out. Filipinos are suffering. And you see things that are going to look like opportunities. Hey, Chinese that's their mess hall over there. They took over that hotel. They're sleeping in there in luxury. That's where they're eating. They got all the women and all the employees. They got them captive. There's 3 of us, 400 of them. That's a good deal. Let's take care of it. The problem with this kind of thinking is that the Filipinos may have plans that you're not aware of. It's going to be so tempting. If this happens, it's going to be incredibly tempting for some of us with experience to physically go there and try to come up with our own plots and plans and schemes. We know we cannot join Filipino forces. We just can't integrate in a situation where you must integrate fluidly to keep from getting Filipinos killed, and maybe yourself too. You don't have time to get integrated unless you start today and join Philippine Army. And 2 or 3 years, when you're fluent in Tagalog, and maybe you could be of some assistance to them. You got to think this stuff through. I was a captain of a rescue tugboat for a long time, longer than I should have been. 321 rescues, 131 shipwrecks raised off the bottom of the ocean. I did a lot of stuff. what I learned on the rescue side of it was that in the very early days, like the first week of doing this, we would get a call from the Coast Guard, and there's a boat in trouble. People are in the water. They're drowning. It's going to take us 6 hours to get there. Can you get there any sooner? And we're like, yeah, man, on it. And we'd head out, take a tug. We had several boats. We'd take a tug. We'd go out. We'd get there. And we would realize about the time we got there that we were not quite prepared for what was going on. And so I learned really, really, really quickly in about a week that, by God, you better extrapolate way, way out ahead of the wave so you can instinctively see and understand what's coming up on the horizon, and you can be ready for it. So I think about things like the Ferengi conflict, the upcoming Ferengi conflict. And I think, okay, well, if let's say it happened an hour from now, how many of us would know what we should do? Virtually none, except people with military experience. Hot military experience. The expats, the American expats especially, they're just going to run around like chickens with their heads cut off. What can I do? What can I do? Can I help? Can I go here? They call in their embassy. It would just be a cluster F. But if you think it up beforehand, and it happens tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, mid-2025, whatever, then you don't have to waste a lot of energy trying to make a plan then, because you've already got your plan in the back of your head. So my plan would be, if this were ever to happen, you're going to make yourself and your family as safe as they can possibly be. If that means relocating to Cebu, then that's what you do for the 3 weeks until the Yanks get there. And make no mistakes, the Yanks will come. Do not doubt it. Do not doubt it. I know a lot of Filipinos are. Some are probably scared. I know a lot of them have varying levels of concern. If China attacks us, oh God, what are we going to do? You're going to make yourself safe and wait for the Yanks, because they don't like China. Now, in my situation, in the situation of guys with military experience, in the situation of any expat here, your plan is going to be, number one, get your family and yourself safe. And number two, watch. Hard to do. It's going to be really stinking hard to just sit on your hands. They're going to have to duct tape me. Gorilla Brand is the best. They're going to have to duct tape me to my office chair. Gag me. Might be one of the hardest things you ever had to do, but that's what you're going to do. You're going to sit it out. Now, let's say the Chinese make it all the way to Manila. Well, they're not going to, but if they did, and you're sitting there in Angeles or in BGC, and they're coming down the street, and the Filipinos are clearly overwhelmed, and clearly they have no cohesive plan, and the Americans are still 2 weeks out, then things change. Then it's rock and roll. I'm not saying I hope that situation comes up. Far be it from me to wish such a thing. But, if it does, oh, that'd be so terrible. Well, it would be terrible if Filipinos were hurt. Then it's not rock and roll, then it's scorched earth. But if no Filipinos are hurt, they're just getting pushed around, they're getting threatened, and buildings are being knocked down, and they've taken over all the hotels, and they've stolen all the food and stuff like that. then it's rock and roll. Then it's fun time. So just have it in the back of your mind. There's no need to stress over it because it's probably not going to happen. It's probably just not going to happen. But if the conflict becomes bloody, you can do more harm than good by getting involved, by inserting and involving yourself without leadership, without structure. You just got no choice. You got to stay out of it. If you're in, Armadillo, Texas, and the same thing happened, well, then there's a higher chance that you could integrate with any organized forces that are there on the ground. The Philippines, no. Cultures are too different. You're not going to understand what they're thinking. You're not going to understand what they're saying. You just got to stay out of it. Just get your people safe, get you safe. You can report on it. You can creep around and report. And that's fun too, Anyway, think it through so that if and when it ever happens, you don't have to wring your hands and tell your wife you're not sure what you should be doing. You don't have to call the embassy. You don't have to go report at your local police station. You don't have to go show up at the Filipino Army barracks. It's already thought through. It's already decided. Just back off. Watch. Wait. See how it develops. I think 2.5 weeks would be the extreme amount of time that any Philippine people would have to wait for the Americans to get here. The chances are very good that they would see the Chinese headed for Philippine shores about 4 seconds after the Chinese decided to do it, and they'd just be right there within minutes, literally within minutes. They probably would prevent them from even getting to the shores. But if by some fluke, a bunch of Chinese made it to the Philippine shores, just watch and wait. You can plan things out in your own mind. You say, well, if they go this way, see, what could I do? What could I do? They make it to downtown Angeles. Well, you gotta go protect the bar girls. Oh yeah, that's a manly thing to do. You gotta do that at least. But you don't act unless there's just no other choice. So I remember in I remember in Ukraine, just after the conflict started, the Ukrainian government was so swamped and overwhelmed with Americans wanting to sign up and fight. They couldn't even handle the emails and the phone calls and the letters. They just couldn't even handle it. There were hundreds of thousands of them. And after a while, they had to say, well, okay, maybe we can accept a few more of you, but you got to bring your own gun. And then after a while, it's like, no, we just can't use you. No, don't come here. And most of the problem was due to glitches in integration. Most of the problem came from no experience, no real fighting experience. You're looking at 99.74% of those guys had never been shot at in their entire lives. And the first time it happened, they're deer in headlights, Oh, I'm a manly man, I hunt deer every year, every fall. Oh, I'm a real outdoorsy man. I can hit a deer. The deer shoots back at me. I'm not even scared, Okay. Those guys need training before before they can take on the Ferengi, even the Ferengi. Okay, just think it through before. Not going to happen. Don't worry about it. Just go about your lives. But have your contingency plan in the back of your mind. Because we are not, our intelligence is not perfect, and we can be surprised sometimes. That's what fighting is all about, getting surprised. Well, being weak, that doesn't help either. Being surprised really sucks. So have these plans on the back of your mind, just in case some little part of the Philippines gets surprised for a short, limited amount of time. And don't pester Philippines authorities. Just if they need people, they're going to go around in trucks with loudspeakers telling you where to sign up. Until that happens, just don't pester them. Don't tax their limited resources with offers to take your deer rifle and go shooting Ferengi. All right. This was a silly podcast. I just thought about it, and if I had a teleprompter, this would be better, wouldn't it? See, because the cameras. This is a stupid little studio. I don't like it. I got to change this around somehow. Okay. Thank you very much. And I gotta do this thing. I always forget it. All tapes are copyright 2024 by StockPhotosWorldwide.com. I should make a little automated thing that just plays automatically at the beginning and the end or something like that. I don't know. All right. Thank you very much, and good evening and good night.